Hello. How are you? How are you guys doing?
Phenomenal. Doing great. We don't have a choice. We're in the middle of harvest. Things
Yeah, I
have to
know.
be
And it's going well this year, I heard. Although a little bit short.
a little short would be a understatement. Yes, compared to normal seasons, compared to last year when we were having fires and all the
Yeah,
rest,
exactly.
we definitely prefer this. Hey, Philip, you made it.
Yes, I made it. Hi, James.
Hey, Philip, how are you? Nice to see
Good,
you.
good. I was going to say it's
Good.
thanks to both of you for getting me out of the winery earlier than I have been in a long time.
But it's going well though, right?
Yeah, it's a drought, and so that and it's a real drought, not like we think back on some of the years that we used to call droughts, like 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Those were low rainfall years. And now this is really a drought. This is less than 10 inches of rain, or around 10 inches of rain 2 years in a row, and that really starts to take its toll on the vineyards, especially the ones that don't have good water resources. So you see, it's kind of like a mixed bag in terms of where you are in the valley, whether or not you have groundwater, because
Yeah.
anybody that had surface water, lakes that filled from runoff, there was no runoff this year. So there was really the ponds are empty. And so that changes things quite a bit. And mostly the yield is down there's a drought related drop in crop, but there's also a kind of a drought related increase in intensity that most of us weren't around. We were around, all of us, in 1976 and 77, but we didn't have like the same perspective on winemaking that we have now. So that the last 2 year drought like this, all I know is that I couldn't take a long shower.
Yeah.
But the rest of it is kind of was not as important to me as it is now.
But didn't you have I mean, theoretically, there was also 5 years of drought before, what was it, 18? I mean, even 12.
Like I was saying, those are really, like, when you put it in perspective, those are like low rainfall years. We're still getting 19, 20 inches of rain. And a lot of times, if the rain, even if there's not a lot of rain, but it falls in the spring and fills up the soil, the vines don't know that you only got 20 inches of rain. They just know that you got 4 inches of rain in March, and they're happy about it. So we didn't get a lot of rain, and we didn't get any late rain. So it's been pretty tough on the vines and yields. And we specifically at Chappellet, we had to carry a very low crop. For what little fruit was there, we had to thin it down to what we thought the vines, not that they could ripen, that they could just handle without putting a lot of stress on them.
And if you hadn't have done that, do you think that they would have blocked then, and then you would have just got dehydration?
Yeah. I think you just would not have gotten real ripeness, and as it was, I mean, in some cases, I have never seen such small berries. I mean, I've seen some small Cabernet berries, but there's a whole nother level that they can go to that I wasn't really aware of.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And so
some of
they're
these
going to have
the wines are big. The wines are
tannic.
very, very concentrated.
But is it more, it's more tannin, phenolics, or is it alcohol as well?
Well, the alcohol, that part of it we can control by our picking date, or if it's high, watering back. But we haven't really, the sugars haven't really run away, which is kind of surprising. It's like each time we get a heat spell, we think, oh my God, it's, the sugars are going to go way up, but they haven't just run away. It's a little surprising. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that they're just big, dark. They're like big wines from like the 70s, except that we have better equipment and more refinement in terms of, we know what those wines were like back then, and we know what 2013 was a huge year.
Yeah.
And we were all there during 2013. So we've got this kind of institutional knowledge, kind of a heads up that says, beware, of what's coming because it's big.
And that's interesting because also I think in that phenomena of where the sugars didn't go through the roof also happened in 15 as well for some reason. So maybe the vines are adapting to this really dry, dry weather and hot weather.
And it may be because of the stress, they're not photosynthesizing in maybe the same way. You find these years like 18 and 19 where everything's so perfect. The vines are just pumping. Whereas you can see these vines are not, they're not, it's not luxurious in any way for them. And maybe that just cuts down their ability to photosynthesize. If they can't pull up water from the soil, then I think it probably slows down their metabolism.
Do you I'm curious, do you leave more foliage, more of a canopy to cover the grapes, or what do you do exactly?
This is unique because I don't think we've ever seen it quite like this, in that the fact that every one of the leaves are half the size they used to be in a normal year. The leaves are smaller. Wow. So it's not like we had something to take away, that we would take in some foliage away. It's almost like, and I don't know if this is how scientific this is, but I've talked to some of the vintners, but when the vine saw, and I'm thinking of like a bear coming out of hibernation, right? Or the vine comes out of hibernation and it's been dormant. It sees that there's no moisture there. There's nothing to grab hold of to start pushing it to get it ready to grow for the season. So it's already kind of hunkered down. And it's already kind of, well, how do I get through this? And I'm just imagining the vine has a little brain, and that little brain is saying, I don't have my normal wetness and things that I would need to have. So everything is going to get smaller. If you saw the bunches, and Philip and I were laughing about it when some of the first Pinot Noir grapes came in from over in Sonoma, and they were a third or a fourth the size of the bunch, the cluster size. They were these cute little tiny berries, but instead of being, a big kind of a cluster like this, they were, I'm not joking, they were kind of this size. They were like, you could put them in your hand. They were just cute little things and tiny little berries. Well, the vine, as Philip was saying, the vine kind of stayed at about the spot that you would see it about 3 or 4 weeks, maybe a month after the vine started to push. It kind of stayed at that level. They didn't get those big leaves. I mean, we normally would see a leaf that was this big. The leaves were this big, And so I think that to answer your question about having to drop a bunch of foliage to do it, we didn't have the opportunity to do it because it wasn't there.
That's really fascinating. But like I'm saying, they seem to be adapting to, the environment, and which I again, it's not scientific, but it sounds like a good thing. Let's just hope it doesn't get any hotter or drier. Did you have a lot of heat spikes this year?
Not really.
Not like we have had plenty of warm weather, but not the very little over 100 degrees. And
good.
And that's the kind of thing that makes a difference, that we didn't have like in 2017 where we just had this relentless heat over in early to mid September, where these record temperatures. Actually, most of them weren't records. They were just really hot. That's something I'm really fascinated by, is that, we're thinking they're record temperatures, but they're not record temperatures. The record may have been in like 1932 or something for that day.
That's interesting.
But it doesn't mean that it's not hot. It's just not a record. And we have had very little of that. And thankfully, and now we've had some kind of cold spells, and now we're in kind of a cold spell where it's I think we're going to for the Mountain Cuvée, we've got some Petit Verdot up in Pope Valley, and the grower, I scheduled the pick, and they said, well, do you mind if we deliver these a little bit late? That's for tomorrow. And they said, well, because it's going to be in the 30s in Pope Valley while we'd be picking.
God.
And they were hoping to let it warm up a little bit before. They didn't want their guys out there picking when it's literally freezing temperatures. Now that's Pope Valley, but it's not far as the crow flies. So it's cold. It's actually a little bit of a cold spell right now.
It's weird because I know also it must have been around May or something. And then you had it was really hot. And then a few days later, it was almost freezing. And so you had a lot of, the weather has been like that, right? I guess the summer has been hot, but I remember in the spring, there was weird weather like that too. No?
Yes. And what the problem is, I can hardly remember one year from the next because I feel like we're getting so sensitive, one person remembers 2 years ago and one's a year ago and then last spring. And it's just we're just freaking out about weather. And sometimes I think we're psyching ourselves out. We're getting so sensitive to every little thing that happens when, maybe when we were less aware, these things just kind of rolled off our backs and we said, yes, it's hot and yes, it's cold. But now we're focused so, keenly on everything, the drought, the fires, the heat, the cold, and it's just farmers never stop watching that kind of stuff. Our Dave Perio, our vineyard manager, I think he just agonizes, with it's so tough on him seeing that wouldn't you say, Cyril? He takes it the hardest.
Yeah. And I guess, I'm sure you're so right though, that's farming. I was thinking when you were talking about how the smaller leaves and smaller crop, and I was curious, what other farmers are saying, whether it's like citrus or other crops, what they're saying about it, because a lot of times we forget that winemaking is essentially farming. That's the key.
Well, just to answer that question a little more broadly, I'm on a bank board that only loans money to agriculture. So
okay.
100% of our structure is to loan money to agriculture, and we have walnut growers, almond growers. All
interesting.
We finance all of Salinas. The real concern in some of the places where they were able to continue putting enough soil moisture, even though they didn't get much rain this last year, but artificially knowing that the row crops that they had to have water in there, they're kind of okay for right now. In the row crops, that means lettuce, broccoli, cauliflower, all those guys. And they seem to be doing okay. What their concern is that in Salinas Valley, that the two main reservoirs that refill their aquifer, that were literally man-made reservoirs, and if you can believe it, they designed a system to release the water into their aquifer to fill up the groundwater underneath this whole valley. And those reservoirs don't have a drop of water in them.
Oh my God.
So what they're doing is they're really lowering the aquifer. And what the big challenge for that area is the salt intrusion that comes from the ocean, because right off, that starts coming in, right? Because you need that pressure of the fresh water, keeping that at bay. Well, now that's starting to come in. So that's really a challenge. And now the people who are pumping off those wells closer to the ocean are starting to find salt in their wells, and that kills the products on the top. So now they can't use it. So that's their issue that they're having. And their real concern is next year. Are we going to get enough rain to fill up those reservoirs, push that aquifer back in and push the salt back away? That's their concern. There are thousands of acres of almond growers who didn't have enough water this year to keep their almond trees alive. And so they are now taking out their almond trees. And an almond tree is like a 7 or 8 year before you get your first almonds on it. So that'll take them
that's right. Yeah.
years before they get anything if they're younger trees, and that's based upon water. The rice people are talking about the same thing. So I think you're exactly right. It is affecting everybody else in slightly different ways.
Yeah.
But this is very real for agriculture across the board. And the question is, are we going to have enough water to continue on? I think we can dry farm. We can do a lot of things that might keep our industry going fairly well. It will change the makeup of what we do and how we do it. But for some of those crops that are really water intensive, it's going to be a challenge if we don't have a fairly normal or maybe a closer to normal rainfall this year. So it's real. I think Philip's point in how we got into this conversation was talking about the stress that our vineyard manager takes upon himself, because, you know, he's trying to do two things. First, wish it weren't this way that it is, and mentally hopefully that he can project a situation where it's not that way. But on the other side, he realizes he can't do that. So now he's thinking of every possible thing that he can do to mitigate and manage the low water and the yields and everything else. So he does carry this weight of the world on him. It's unfair because it's nothing that he could do, but if he can find a solution, and our guys have been very creative about things that they've done. So Philip's right. He carries an extra burden for all of us that is probably not really fair, you know.
So who has the better rain dance, you or Philip?
That would be Cyril.
I don't want to judge. I wouldn't want to judge this, and
I've seen Cyril dance. Actually, I'm such a bad dancer. Maybe it wouldn't make rain happen. Maybe it'll pay off.